Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number 3029-6-646. This is the quintessential double-acting spring hinge, the hinge that if there were a definition of it in Merriam-Webster, this would be what they would show you. The only thing that makes it less common would be just the 646 part of the part number, which we're going to define quite clearly in a moment. Pulling it out of the package, we're going to go over we're going to do a review of the item visually, look at the dimensions, we're going to go over the extended description, we're going to dive into how to size the door, we're going to talk about how to install the hinge finally. So 3029, that is the classic Bommer double-acting spring hinge. If you've seen a double-acting spring hinge somewhere, it's either a Bommer 3029, if it's 1.75 inches, 1.5 inches, even a little thicker. It's either a 3029 or it's a clone. It's a copy of a 3029, and here it is. The typical classic double barrel spring hinge. And what happens, double acting spring hinge, what happens is the door gets installed in this pocket here, okay? So the door is sticking out here, the door gets pushed, that comes out, that spring's going to force the door back to center and then back out this way is how that's going to work. Out like this, comes back to center, then the second barrel takes over and the door continues to move. You see them everywhere. Restaurant doors, very commonly. Double-acting doors in restaurants. I've been in movie theaters where they have these in the common area from the food preparation out to either a common hallway, things of that nature. Not used for fire-rated doors whatsoever. This would not be compliant with any sort of fire-rated requirement. The 3029 is simply what I've said. It's the classic double-acting spring hinge. The 6 is a reference to the thickness of the door, really. There's really nowhere on the hinge that will measure 6 inch clearly and obviously. But when someone says, I need a double-acting spring hinge, I don't say, well, what size hinge do you need? The question is, how thick is the door? And then you translate that into, how thick is the door, into a size. A 6 inch, that's going to work really well for doors from 1.25 to 1.75. Really 1.75. If you've got an 1.5 door, an 1.375 door, you can use the 5 inch. It's, yes, marginally smaller. The 646, I don't sell many of them in 646. That means a couple of things. It means it's made of steel. The finish is meant to be satin nickel, okay? Not zinc, not satin chrome, all of which are chrome or brushed type finishes. The zinc is going to be a little bit more reflective. But if you want something that's going to be a bit more faithful to a satin nickel finish, the 646 finish would do that. 646 means two things. It means it's made of brass, whatever it is, and it means it's a satin nickel finish. Pardon me, stop. I just said that wrong. 619 would mean that it's made of brass. 646 means whatever it is, it's made of steel. Secondly, it's a satin nickel attempt on steel. When I mean attempt, it's always going to be something complementary. If you want a true satin nickel finish, you'd probably be using brass base material as the benchmark to attest against. So in this family, you're going to have from Bommer, the 652 is satin chrome, 646 is satin nickel. You can do a 603, which is a zinc color, and it will be a shiny silvery color. You can do a 651, which would be a polished chrome type finish. Okay, but this one here is satin nickel. So satin nickel we don't sell often. If you're going to buy a finish of this material, it will be prime coat, satin brass, maybe polished brass, oil rub bronze, satin chrome, zinc, bright black japanned. All of those are more common than satin nickel. Even satin bronze, which would be a 639 finish, I think is more common than 646. And I think maybe this client purchased this because we offer it. If we only offered 652, they probably just would have ordered that. Let's get to the Suffice it to say, you can order this in all of those finishes I just mentioned, and being Bommer, they can likely entertain any request for a finish that can be done on steel, which is lots of finishes. So there is information down below in the extended description. Let's start to tackle that data now. Mortise type, it can be mortised to the edge of the door. We'll talk about that in a moment. Non-template, that refers to the fact that the location of these holes for the screws is in no particular standardized location. It's standard for a Bommer 3029, but nothing else is going to match that. Therefore, it's non-template. The term template refers to an industry standard. If I were to tell a door manufacturer it's a template hinge, they're going to know exactly where to prep, drill, and tap the holes for the screws. Non-handed, indeed. This is going to swing 90 degree this way, back to 0, negative 90 this way. 1.25 inch and 1.75 inch thick doors. That's the important thing. What's your door thickness? Minimum door height, 7 foot. Maximum door weight for 2 hinges, 75 pounds, and 3 hinges, 107 pounds. Maximum door width, 2 hinges, 2'8", and 3 hinges, 3'0". So the bottom line is this. They've got some guidelines in terms of weight there, and I would rigidly adhere to those. If you are unsure, add a hinge. It's the bottom line. Not only because I'm a hinge salesman, but you'll call and say, yeah, my door is not behaving very well. It doesn't stay in the door frame. It kind of leans out. Yeah, sure, you don't have enough spring power holding the door up. And plus, as that door travels through its cycle, it's not just working off a pivot point. It's actually going a little bit elliptical. Wouldn't you agree that those leaves are going to separate ever so slightly every time that door, in exaggerated fashion, ever so slightly as the door comes through its opening and then closing cycle? So, if in doubt, add another hinge. Now, in terms of these guidelines, can you put them on a 2-foot door? You can. Can you put them on a 8-foot door? You can. But the testing that the manufacturer has done has produced these guidelines. If you get off the reservation, so to speak, you're kind of on your own. You can call the factory, and I have, and they'll say, yeah, add another hinge. Or, yeah, that's going to be, you've got a 2-foot door that's 6'8" tall, and you've got, that door is going to move pretty fast, because you've got a lot of spring power and a small amount of door weight. So be mindful of that. And we'll talk more about the location of those hinges when we get to the installation instructions. Door flange is mortised into edge of door. Jam flange is surface applied to frame. That door flange is mortised to edge of door is incorrect. It's incomplete. And by the time you're seeing this video, I will have that corrected. The door flange can be mortised, or it can be surface mounted. So it should say it can be either mortised or surface mounted, which by the time you're seeing this is what it's going to say. Continuing through the extended description, do not use on doors with hinge edge beveled. That's for sure. This plate is going to be, square. It's going to be at a 90-degree angle to the door that you apply here. If you've got a beveled edge door, that's going to take that door from sitting, true in the opening to being skewed to one side or another. You'll need to make the door square edge or order the door square edge to use this type of hinge without excessive and very odd shimming. Packed with all wood screws, that is for sure. Wood screws in a complementary finish, in fact. The hinge is per hinge. That's the price. Sold per hinge. When you buy one, you'll get one hinge. You're going to need at least 2 hinges to hang a door. You very likely will require 3. You might even go higher than that. But be mindful, you can order odd quantities or even quantities of the hinge as they're sold as each. Now let's move down to the template. And the template is going to permit us to discuss how to size the door in relationship to your rough opening and your door size, and etc., and the hinge requirements. So first of all, before we get into that, you do see that there's a place where 6 inches is going to is somewhere where you can measure. That is going to be on the hinge leaf itself. I don't find that to be the case in all instances where you can actually measure something on there. I don't know that this height really matters. It doesn't matter to me. What does matter to me is this hinge not working on my door. And again, the question is, what's the door thickness? That will define your available options. Depending on your door thickness, you're going to have, you'll probably have more than one option. You might be able to use a 15 series hinge from Bommer. You might have to only use 30-29s, or maybe you can get into 30-24s or clamp style hinges. You might be able to use their 7800 series floor pivots. So the door thickness, again, is what it is. So all those crazy dimensions are there that will allow you to review the location of the screws primarily. And that's where, on the left half of the page, you're going to see a cross-section in the upper left-hand corner of what it's supposed to look like when you've got it installed. What the hinge looks like when it's spread out like this. It's exactly what it looks like. That's what you're looking at there. Now, the right side, this is where the rubber meets the road. So you have to have three things work together: your finished opening size, your net door size, and what the hinge requires. You've got to start somewhere with that, and it's very likely that you're going to be relegated to working with one of those dimensions as fixed. Well, no, you're going to work with two of those dimensions as fixed because, well, no, one of them will be fixed. That's either going to be the net door width, and you're going to create an opening around it. That's less common, certainly, than walking onto a job site and saying, here's my finished opening. Here's my cased opening frame. It already exists. And that's probably what you'll encounter when you go to install these. You have to start somewhere. Something has to be defined, and the net door size, which is the bottom line, is going to be based off of starting somewhere. Let's say, just for the sake of simplicity, you have a 36-inch finished opening. Very simple. You've got a restaurant, and you do want to add a double acting door into that opening. It's a 36-inch finished opening. You're going to have a 3070 door, and you know you're going to use 3 hinges because you're going to be over that 2-hinge limit. And that would be very typical. 3 hinges on a 3070 solid core door in a kitchen. It's going to have a 10x10 window or a narrow light so that people can see other people approaching the door from the opposite side. Okay, so you know you've got frame opening a 36-inch. Great. Frame opening equals the actual door width plus the A dimension. Okay? If it's a single door, I should have said we're working with a single door. So your frame opening is going to be 36-inch. That equals your actual door width plus your A dimension. Let's forget about the actual door width for right now because A is the variable. That's either going to be 1/2 inch or 7/16. You're either going to mortise the door leaf into the edge of the door according to the 0.105 mortise depth shown on the left side, or you're not going to. If you're literally going to apply your door to the surface of this leaf and not chisel the edge of the door at all, that 0.105, so that the door can come and stick over further and get much closer to the jamb itself, okay, that would leave you with a really nice tight margin there if you mortised it. But most people don't. They just apply it to the edge. So what you're going to see there is that you're going to allow non-mortised 1/2 inch for that. So frame opening is 36. You know you're not mortising the flange. Minus 1/2 inch. That equals 35.5 inch for your door width. You can see how that all comes together. If you want to mortise the flange, you're gonna then be able to work with 7/16. Well, let's just stick with non-mortised. 1/2 inch. What's going on there? Well, that's really going to leave you with the margin on the hinge side of the door, along with some space on the opposite side of the door. So if you're not going to mortise the hinge leaf, and I don't really, oh yeah, it's giving it to it. Well, let's measure it. It's telling us it's 0.325 upper left-hand corner. If I put my caliper on all of this, it's 0.326. That's pretty good. All of this, let's just say 0.325. Okay, your door is going to sit here, jam's going to be here. 0.325 of that ½ inch is consumed over on that side. What does that leave you on the other side? That leaves you the distance, 0.175. 0.175 is going to be the gap between the push plate side of the door and its jamb. So you'll have 3/16 over there. You're going to have basically, you know, a little less than 5/16 and a little less than 3/16 over here. And that's going to be your margin. If you want to tighten that up a little bit, go ahead and mortise the door. Really all you're picking up there is now I would think you'd be able to really cheat out, make that margin a bit tighter. The point I'm trying to make is if you mortise the edge of the door for this plate, the depth of that, and they're saying 0.105 mortise depth. Okay, yeah, that makes sense how you're going to have that ½ inch. But if you mortised it deeper to bring that edge of that door basically flush to the lip, that's going to make really... you're going to need to... You'd need to mortise it a little bit shallower than that. You don't want the door coming all that way. The point of the matter is, you know, I would probably mortise it so that I achieved a 3/16 gap on either side. That's probably what I would do to tighten it up so that it looked symmetrical. I've seen these double-acting doors in places, and the margin's really small over here, really big over here, really huge over here. I might look to get my caliper and balance all of that out. Now, speaking of that, the almost 3/16 on the push plate side, you could certainly reduce that to 1/8 of an inch, if not less, if you wanted to. You would have to radius the door edge to do that. Radiusing the door edge is not discussed here at all, but you could certainly put an 1.5 inch radius. That would make a very large round-over bit to the edge of the door, so that if my fist was analogous to a score edge door, you can see how I've got to have margin there. But if I radiused all of that over, I'm breaking these hard outside corners, and I'd be able to bring that door closer because I'm not going to hit that outside corner of the door. I've radiused door styles for double-acting doors dozens of times. I would use I had a router just set for doing that with a base that I cut out so I could fit my giant round-over bit into it. And yeah, it's like a 3-inch diameter bit. If you're doing one off and you have no need to radius doors over ever again, you're not going to do this. But if you are in a situation where you want to be able to do it and need to be able to do it repeatedly, I would use a good 1.5 router. I would take my base off, remove the screws, take my base, and I cut the center of the router base, put that all back in, and that size that I cut it to would allow me to bring that giant round-over bit. And the last time I bought one, it was certainly over $200. But it does a phenomenal job. You would then get that router, you'd lay your door flat, get your router up on the one end, and you would very carefully just pass it down one time. And you have to be very mindful to not tip it at all, because you've got a large router bit that's going to have a lot of gyroscopic effect as you try to move that. You're going to have, let's say, a 1.5 router. That's a big router. I don't know that I would want to tax a tiny little 3/4 router on it. I'd use a bigger one. You got a lot of material that you're moving at one time, removing, and I would make that pass, and I wouldn't tip it at all. If you tip it towards the edge of the door, you're going to gouge the door in an unnatural way that you're not going to be able to repair. Going back any further is not going to really do much damage unless you really try to force it and cut too much of the face off. You want that radius to be graceful and consistent down the face of the door. So I would get it on there, and now that I think of it, you could probably even manufacture a custom base where it could be, you know, maybe rectangular, where it was 12 inches deep, so that you could really rest the router on the door without having just half of the base kind of wobble on the edge of the door. So get your modified router on there and make one pass, and then be sure to exit straight off. Resist the temptation to go back this way, because you're going to round over the wrong part of the door. Make one more pass, just a skimming, clean pass. In case there's any vibration that you've put into the tool at all that will ripple the edge of the door, make one more skim pass. That's it. Don't do it anymore. If you do it more, you're just going to take off stuff you're not supposed to. You got, now what you really have is a bull-nosed door. And that would be great if you were doing a single acting door. That would be on the pull side of a single acting door hung on center hung pivots. Take that door, flip it over, 2 passes again. Okay? You're not going to radius the hinge side. That's the bottom line. The upside of radiusing the lock side would be that you'll get a tighter margin, if that is something that you want to achieve. The substantial downside of doing that is not only not having the tools possibly, but the real problem can be in a veneered door application where you have a commercial architectural, I should say an architectural wood door where you've got veneer, cross-banding, backer style. You are going to severely accentuate those layers as you radius through it. It is like quarter slicing lumber, where they are exposing, actually that's not the term I'm looking for. Rift cut is the term I was looking for. There are 4 ways that veneer is sliced. Rift is one of them. It basically takes a quartered section of the entire log, a quarter of it, applies it to a tool that it turns on an axis. My finger is the axis. Well, the log sits up here, so it turns like this. Then the knife comes and hits that so that it cuts like on an arc. The knife isn't on an arc, but the material is on an arc. So you, in your mind's eye, can understand how you would accentuate certain features of that veneer as the knife hits it. Same concept. You're going to accentuate these different layers. I did a job one time where the client specified this and said, I don't like those lines. And I said, yeah, I don't like them either. What do you want to do? Well, they're not acceptable. Okay, you ordered the hardware, you ordered the door. The problem with that conclusion is that these were cherry doors. They weren't being painted. Okay? That sort of project ought to have been handled differently, understanding the nature of how the door is manufactured, to say, you're going to have nice cherry veneer, a light line, a dark line, the style. That's not going to look nice. Veneer is manufactured where you can prep it and then run that around the door naturally, which would have been the way to have solved that. But that experience taught me to bring it to the attention of whomever is going to be considering rounding over or radiusing, or bullnosing or radiusing a door edge. It was not a satisfactory conclusion to have those cherry doors look that way. That's just the bottom line. They didn't use double-acting spring hinges. They used center-hung pivots. Same sort of problem with that scenario. If you wanted to explore the different ways to cut a log, upper right-hand corner of our website, go to Contact Us. When that page loads, at least now, scroll to the bottom left-hand, hard left-hand side under Industry Links, then click National Organizations, and then look for the AWI Section 1300 link, and search the term quartered, and you'll certainly find a description of how logs are cut. So be mindful of radiusing the door over, because you might have to contend with, that sort of unintentional look that you're going to get on the door. If you're doing a pair of doors, the same sort of math applies. Mortise, not mortised, frame opening. Now, you might be starting with a net door size. My door is 36 inch. I can't change it at all. Okay, well, you're going to mortise the hinge flange or not. That's what your finished opening has to be. So that's what you have to create. Okay, and that's how the handing of this, the sizing of the door is accomplished. Now let's move on to the last document, which is the installation instructions, and they are included with the hardware. I expect it to be the same version. June of 2004 is this revision date. There's installation instructions and then this document, so it's all rolled up into one. The installation instructions on page 1 of that document, the important thing on that page is if you have more than 2 hinges on the door, you're going to want that second hinge installed as it's shown, not where you and I are normally trained to put it, right in the middle. Don't do that. You need them both soldier stacked at the top, then that bottom one's just along for the party, basically. So be sure to soldier stack them the way that they've called them out. If you were going to do 4 hinges on a door, I probably would put that 4th hinge in the center between the 2nd and 4th hinge is what I would do. But that would also depend on what I was trying to do. There is no guideline for a 4-hinge door, so be mindful that you are kind of on your own in that regard. The installation instructions on the right side really go along with the 6 cells on the left-hand side. The bottom line is this, and I'll read the installation instructions. Remove spring tension from each hinge barrel by inserting tension rod into the tension adjustment hole. Rotate in the direction of the arrow, as shown in Figure 2 or Figure 1, and remove the tension pin. Okay, they don't have their figures mentioned or identified, but nonetheless. What they're saying here is this. When this hinge comes from the factory, if you can just do this, there are no tension pins installed. If tension pins are installed in the tension collar, and that's what this and this are called, and you'll notice they aren't down here, you'll want to remove them. That's the arrow that they refer to. That is in the clockwise direction, the direction of the arrow. Here are the tension pins. For every hinge you order of a 3029, you're going to get 2 tension pins. For every order you place, you'll get at least 1 tension rod. Okay. And this goes for setting the tension as well. If you need to remove the tension or set the tension, insert the tension rod, turn it in the direction of the arrow. When the collar's pointed up, that's clockwise. If you install it down here, which you can, okay, that is now counterclockwise. Speaking of installing them tension collar down, if you're doing a pair of doors, it is mentioned they want one set with the tension collars up, they want the other set with the tension collars down. That does, according to the manufacturer, help alignment of the 2 doors. And let's talk about alignment right now before I forget. I've had customers call me and say, I've got a pair of doors, my doors aren't in alignment. Okay, first of all, are the doors square edged or beveled? They're beveled. Okay, square them off and they call me back. My doors aren't aligned. Okay, do you have the tension square or beveled? They're square. Okay. Do you have one set of tension collars pointed up and the other set of tension collars pointing down? No. Take one set of hinges off, flip them over, let me know. Hey, my doors aren't aligned. What's going on? I have a pair of doors. They're not aligned. Square or beveled? They're square. Tension collars up or down, one of each on either side. Okay, great. Now the problem is, how do we know the jamb is not towed at all? We really don't. Assuming the door is at 90, you really start to get into an area where the doors will be askew if there's any condition by which the cased opening frame is not absolutely perpendicular to the opening. In that case, you're going to need to shim. You're going to have to stick. You're going to have to build something off of something to be able to take this and move it out. And loosening a hinge screw and sticking something inside of there is going to be the order of the day, so to speak, to bring that into alignment. I generally don't find that to be a problem because I think generally construction is good and jambs are installed the way they ought to be. But that would be the other reason I can think of why you would have that problem. And every time someone's called me with that problem, I'll tell you, the majority of time, occasionally, I have a beveled edge door and they just didn't even think about it. But it's really those jambs not being exactly where they need to be. So expect in a pair of doors to have to exert additional effort to get them aligned exactly how you like. And also, the door could be marginally warped. You could have a door flush down here, but up at the top it just does this in an exaggerated fashion naturally. It will just come away like this. There's not much you can do in that regard. The door manufacturer is likely not going to be very sympathetic because these hinges aren't going to help keep a door from warping. And I would think that they're going to argue that it's improperly hung in terms of a warranty claim. So be mindful. You've got a lot of things you're working with in a pair of doors. Now, locate the hinges as shown in Figure 1. You can either mortise or surface apply the leaf. Align the center line of the door with the center line of the frame and secure the frame leaf. What they're saying is put the door in the center of the jamb, put the hinge in the center of the jamb, make it all one vertical axis. And that's where they then say for best alignment of double doors, mount hinges on one door with tension adjustment up, down on the opposite door as shown in Figure 1. Shims may be necessary under the edges of the frame flanges, not the door flange, for door alignment. Okay. So what I would do is I would remove any tension. I would apply the hinges to the frame. I would then get the doors attached to the hinges, and obviously they're going to move. They're going to be loose and fall around. You're going to shim them from the bottom. You're going to shim them vertical, and you're going to make sure they're ready to roll. Then you're going to come in and start to apply tension. But be mindful, your door is going to want to start to move as you start to set tension on them. But that's how you'll go about doing that. You will insert your tension rod, turn it clockwise if they're pointed up. It's into one of those new additional holes that you're going to drop in one of those tension pins. They'll only go in one way. The long end is what goes in. Do not exceed 5 holes of tension. I've had people call me and say, I installed that hinge you shipped me, and the first thing it did was snap the spring. Okay. How heavy's the door? 150 pounds. How many hinges did you use? 2. How many holes of tension? I don't know, 8 or 9. So be mindful. The people at Bommer have been exhaustive in engineering their products and testing them. And I've spoken to the head engineer there, and they test their products. They know what the products are going to do. Springs in Bommer hinges never just break. I've really never had an instance where it just broke. So be mindful. Stay within the requirements. If you hear severe contorting in a new installation, check how many holes of tension. So why did the guy need 8 or 9 holes of tension? And he probably had 12 or 13. Because he didn't have enough hinge. His door was way too heavy. His door is leaving the opening because there wasn't enough stored hinge tension to keep the door upright. So all of that worked against him. He had to crank the daylights out of it just to get the door to stand like this. And then you put it into motion. You've got, a huge amount of tension cranked, and then you continue to open it, further compressing the spring. That's why it broke. Place the door in the closed position, wedge it up from the floor, make sure it's plumb, set your tension. You're going to install the hinges as specified there. Lubrication may be applied to the hinges. I'll always I was about to say I'll always tell clients that it's okay to lubricate hinges. I generally only have clients call and say, why is my hinge squeaking so much? Well, can I lubricate it? Well, how old is the hinge? I don't know. It's been here 10 years. Yeah, I mean, the spring that's inside of there is just steel-based. So oxidation is going to naturally occur on the surface of it just from the moisture in the environment. I've had people use your typical spray adhesives. I'd get a rag to catch that overspray and get it into the seam at the tension collar. That will work. You're going to want to, you'll be mindful that it's going to drip. So be mindful to wipe it off. Maybe leave a rag underneath the hinge if you can to catch any dripping that comes through, because you will need to get a liberal amount in there to coat the outside of the spring. There is a manufacturer who does make a non-ferrous based double acting spring hinge. It's not Bommer. Don't sell much of them, but occasionally someone wants something that's non-ferrous based, so we can help you with that. So that exhausts the 2 documents. That exhausts the extended description. The last thing I'd like to point out is the Bommer logo. And right above it, it says Made in USA, a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. I have seen Bommer hinges installed in every place I've ever visited, whether it be the American Southwest or especially New York. If you're in a hotel in New York and it wasn't built in the last 30 years, and most of those buildings were not, okay, you are going to take a trip down the history of Bommer hinges. I have been on submarine of the Navy, and I've seen Bommer spring hinges installed. So you're going to see them everywhere. They're quite proud of what they do. It's a very good product. They have a relatively petite footprint of material offered in the industry, but when it comes to double acting spring hinges, single acting spring hinges, commercial, institutional, architectural, non-spring hinges, residential spring hinges, continuous gear hinges, high-end lavatory hardware, Bommer's name is quite synonymous with those product lines, and I would encourage you to review their catalog. You can get to the catalog from the link below this video, where you can review not only all the Bommer products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. Any questions on the Bommer 3029-6-646 or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.